Yeah. How's life been going?
Um, I mean, it's challenging, but I'm trying to this point in my life look for the blessings and the blessing in disguise, if you want to call it that way.
Right.
I was it was about last year. This time last year, I was like going to DC and working out there, and I would be commuting for 4 hours a day and barely see my kids. So,
Right.
the blessing for me is now I see my kids all the time. It's an extreme,
Right.
but you get what you ask for. So I think on a personal note, it's been very much a blessing to be with my family. I'm getting to know them
Yeah.
more than I feel like I have, and they're growing. They're kids, and my wife and I we're seeing things that we just didn't see before.
Right.
But as far as like other things, I think those things are kind of in flux. I mean, I've been just teaching part time, so like my financial security has been in flux. My wife, she's a counselor, and it's based on who she counsels, so that's been
Right.
in flux. I mean, it's been a year in flux, but I haven't found job security ever. So
Right.
I'm just always plan B in it all the time.
So
So
you're a little prepped for it, a little hardened to it.
yeah, I mean, I was homeless for some time, in my teens. Actually, not my teens, my 20s. So I kind of been into a position where I had nothing. The
Right.
only difference is now I'm like responsible for a family, and they don't have that mindset. So in my
Right.
mind, I have to kind of find ways to encourage and at the same time, stay at peace. Just realizing that some things are in your control and some things are
Right.
not. So to kind of fight those things and get frustrated only wastes your energy.
Right.
So
Yeah. No, yeah, I feel you on that. It's interesting kind of point to make because so much of the paintings and work you make, um, it seems like at least within the past couple of years, these the personal narrative or the symbols from the personal narrative are taking like a certain kind of forefront in the paintings. Like I was thinking about um, the show at you did at Langrover Dickey. Never had a jump shot, never had a plan. There's a quite a number of pieces that reflect on your own kind of history, your own personal narratives. And I remember at the end of the show, you were having a conversation, and you said that a lot of times the work you make is related to what you would want to tell your kids about your own personal narrative. Um, so, do you think, well, as you said, like as you're kind of now that you're spending even more time and you're getting to know them even more, and as they're growing, is that changing? Is it becoming more explicit, or is the medium changing?
um, yes and no. I mean, there's a lot of things in the mix. My studio practice is it's interesting. Like I don't see my studio practice as a continuous kind of time. It's usually a big solid chunk, and then there's a little pitter patter that happens throughout the in between. And
Right.
so since that show, there's been a little bit of pitter patters, and then those pitter patters. That's when I start thinking in more creative ways. I think
Right.
I'm usually trying to do things that are creative, but not always as demanding as I think my painting. So I like do smaller creative pieces and things like that. But I do think that um, I guess my work is changing in the fact of what's going on. There's always a narrative.
Right.
There has to be for me something that kind of pushes. And the narrative for that conversation with my oldest Indigo is still present, specifically in this painting I'm looking at right now that I'm still trying to figure out. It's kind of its early stages, but this specific thing. I guess I can flip it around so you can look at it.
Cool.
This specific thing it was something I thought about 2 years ago, and then like 2 weeks ago, I had a dream about this painting, and so that conversation is interesting with this painting because this painting, I've been going back and forth with names, but I'm thinking about my family tree, and to kind of make a little bit more sense, this is a collage that I'm working on.
Oh, wow.
So this was interesting. What's weird about this painting, and I a lot of people be like, man, you're morbid, and I'm like, yeah, I guess I can be, but with the coronavirus, I've been thinking about like more than ever that time is not allotted to you, and every day is a precious day. So when I'm with my kids, there's moments, in and out moments, where I'm like, oh my God, I just want to be by myself. But then there's moments where there are those intimate conversations where I'm talking to Indigo about what's happening in the world and trying to bite-size it. And I think the paintings are more this longer, wider, more adult-like conversation that's happening that I hope that she will pick up on in the years to come as she gets older. That specific painting, when I had a dream about it, I was thinking about the morning of the sadness of a loss. And so with these two individuals, as a father and daughter, looking at a cut down tree, and I thought about before, like the family tree, and there's a lot of missing information that I can't give my daughters. So that morning, mixed in with the coronavirus and thinking about like time is not allotted, I decided to kind of focus solely on this painting and take every day to relish the fact that I'm able to paint it with the hope that I'll be able to finish it, knowing that there might not be. So I think what we might all feel is that there's been a lot of moments of just being still, and just being at peace. And I think this painting is that kind of thing for me right now. Instead of like just trying to knock it out for the next show, I'm really trying to enjoy it. And I'm thinking more deeper in some of the meanings and the connection that I'm trying to have with my daughter through these personal journeys. So yeah, I think there's some changes happening. I'm also working on some other smaller projects, that I feel like, actually fit right now. So there's a lot going on, regarding that.
Well, it's like interesting because I think when people think of morbidity in art and everything like that, they think a lot of, the syllables that come to mind are always like the memento mori and this reminder that, time isn't allotted to you and that, death walks beside you at all times. But on the other hand, what's different, because that's usually an exercise in humility, I think in like kind of the visual and the history of painting or whatever. But it seems like what you're talking about is like you're recognizing like a generational trauma. You're recognizing a mourning for maybe stories untold or cut short. But while you're building that framework, like a lot of like myth making and a lot of like cultural histories, like you're setting that framework for your next generation. It's like, this is how we talk about it. This is how we address, and this is how it kind of shapes us for the future, right? Because a painting, even though it's like always a passive object after it's done, but it's always forward looking, right? It's always done for the next viewer. So I find that really kind of interesting that through these like smaller practices, you're still kind of building these, I don't know, like ritual isn't the right term for it, like a family heirloom or archive, something that a story would be attached to. It's like, oh, so and so, like if somebody had like and if families do weird stuff like that, it's like, oh, we have a belt, and it's like, whose belt is that? It's like, but there's always usually a story or some kind of value. Like by value, I mean um, like uh, your values and ethics. Like there's an ethos attached with the item.
Yeah. You know, and another thing too is I've always looked up to like, you know, when you speak about values and that kind of sense, you know, in grad school specifically, I did a lot of research on the morals.
Right.
You're like George Gross, and you have Bill Nye.
Oh yeah.
Boyd, you know, you
Hogarth
have a lot.
with the Rake's Progress.
Definitely Hogarth. I think those are what there was been two shows. I mean, 30 decades apart with those four individuals specifically in the exhibition, right? So I think it was clear that everybody considered them the focus on morality. But you know, it's interesting that in this time and day and age, we are so diverse, and morality is very dependent on what you see it as.
Oh yeah.
But I think within the family, that element hasn't changed. The handing down from parent to child, and I think so. There's room for me in that conversation about morality when discussing this with my daughter. But let's be honest, like this is conversations that the viewer's actually going to be looking at. It won't be.
Right.
I'm not making this big painting for my daughter Indigo just to be looking at it. Right. So I do think that there's kind of like a voyeurism happening in some kind of way where the viewer is looking at the painting. I feel like I realized this after painting a few more than a few, painting this work, that I don't really leave any room for the viewer. It's definitely where it's between my daughter and I. So it's a very closed conversation, but it's out and open. It's like an open letter in some way. And so I do feel like there's a voyeurism when you're thinking about that context. So it's interesting. And it's just been recently I realized that. It wasn't intended, but it was like, oh, am I really kind of like creating this thing where you're kind of peeking into this conversation? Right. And I've been wrestling if I like that or not, but at this point, I think I kind of like it because I do think it brings a connection because you think about your own family and that connection you might have had with parents. But
it becomes like a conversation between like, if we're talking about morals, like little morals, like these are the morals of our group, morals or mores, versus like big capital M moral majority society kind of thing. So I think I approach it that way, and then also your titles, like for example, when you like Icarus is a cautionary tale, right? Like, but and then so when I see the objects hanging in Icarus, then it becomes that. I understand that there's something cautionary and something about the hanging, and we had them hung high up in the gallery, so that becomes part of it. But it doesn't become specific. I understand, and I do think maybe voyeurism isn't the right word, but you know, when you go and hang out in a place with multiple families, you see how people interact. You're like, oh, that's how you all organize it.
Okay. I mean, how many of us have like those friends that we'll go hang out with the most and be part of their family in some way, and you get to know truly what that parent is really like after they get used to you. I mean, the moment when you're able to open up the refrigerator and grab food, then you're probably going to know more than you should know. So I do think there is that kind of conversation about being brought into the family that I'm now aware of, or I've been aware of for a little bit, and it's more like, what do I share in some of this work? And I'm not a person that like hides anything in regards to kind of like conversations, but I'm really excited about what's coming out right now for there's been some excitement for that, because I think when I've been doing this for 2 years, this body of work, it was me trying to learn the materials. Now that I already know those materials, now I'm going deeper into more of my conversations, I have yet to have things that I want to share. So there's getting a lot more. There's been a lot more interesting things developing recently on that.
Awesome. Well, like on this painting that you gave us a preview of just now, it looks like, are you with those large black areas? Are you doing the Velcro again?
Yeah. Well, yes and no. So the black areas are all Velcro. I've been adding felt, and I've been actually adding other materials such as like vinyl tiles and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
But the purpose of the Velcro is both in the sense of its space and for what it does, and that's here.
Right.
For me, a panel. But there are some that should be exposed at different points, so it does play different fields of usage. But panels will be attached to them, and it's like working on two different surfaces.
Wow.
You have the canvas that everything's attached onto, and then the panel. So it really plays with layering and trying to keep everything kind of fresh and overdoing to kind of get them to match a little bit.
Well, with the go ahead.
No. What are you gonna say?
I was gonna say with the Velcro, because when the viewer, like, that's a material that most of the viewers are familiar with, so it also does this interesting thing because it lets the viewer know, like, oh, these panels, it's implied that they're movable, that they can be taken off in place. So then it becomes a potential animation in that sentence.
That's what I knew early on in the work about that temptation. And it took me a while to wrestle with that lack of interaction for the viewer.
Right.
And how I felt about it. But then as I began to do more reading, dealing with social issues and black and brown historical situations, part of me realized that there was a temptation for all of us to want to change ourselves or to be accepted in some way. So kind of remove that access to be able to do that was removed from us historically, right? No matter what, people will see me as this black man, and they'll connect all these different stereotypes with it. Right. So
the black painter.
yeah, right. And I know that personally, and so like for me to kind of do the same thing with the temptation to want to touch but saying no, that's my little bit of control, right? And that's kind of like taking some kind of power back that I might have felt that I lost due to that feeling of saying like you can't touch it. Having access like that for the kind of conversations I'm having, I think that became very clear early on. And so I find more and more ways to kind of make it where you want to grab it. And I think having the Velcro exposed shows his hands. I had other paintings where there was no Velcro exposed, and I didn't feel like it gave that same readout. Right. But the temptation, not that I rule those out, like, there should be some mixtures of different things, but I do think about like, what parts do I want exposed?
Right. Well, that becomes like a really powerful narrative element, like in a car at the finish line.
Yeah.
Because you have the automobile and it's fractured into these various tiles that are Velcroed on there. Yeah. So, the entendre of the finish.
That was a fun painting, and I think that was one of the first ones that I kind of didn't have as much Velcro exposed. But I think that painting, actually, out of all the paintings I think in that show, that was probably one of my most personal ones.
Right.
Compared to all of them, I think that was one of the most personal ones. It's kind of feeling that by the time you do get to the finish line, you're already broken apart. Right. That kind of thing. And I think that had a lot to do. I think I was painting that dealing with work issues, and I felt depleted. And so I think that that kind of like, when you get that success, it doesn't mean it's kind of like over. It actually means it's probably going to be a lot harder.
Right.
And so I think that's where that painting kind of comes from. I think culturally, or not historically, I think with people of color kind of pushing through, it's not just black people. I think it's really any person of color trying to work their way up for their own livelihood, for their family. You will find yourself dealing with more issues, both racially and dealing with your culture, your sex. I think so. I think that painting, personally, I had attached a lot to that because I feel like that is my family's history.
Right.
All the way from my grandparents, they've always had the issue of trying to get ahead without having all the obstacles. So.
Right. Yeah, it's what was that? The very kind of like a Ralph Ellison kind of moment, like As Much As You Fight. Well, also that's also interesting because it puts the power on another aspect as well, because you have certain people can't touch it and move the pieces around, but you definitely can.
Yeah, and they change a lot. So even though
really, so they're not always hung the same way. It's
no. So the way it's everything down from the collage to the painting. Like the collage will take me about 2 weeks. I'll move pieces in there, and then I force myself to kind of start from scratch and then move pieces again.
Right.
So I'm always playing with these pieces, and I'm having multiple going, and so trying to kind of find all the different varieties I can. But even after all that, and everything's kind of like taped down, I'm like, I still don't think that this is complete or finished. So I cut the Velcro to the size of whatever the canvas is, and I use like some kind of like spray adhesive.
Yeah.
And then I spray it down, and then I play around with the Velcro being around the canvas until I feel like, okay, it makes sense. Much of the time it will stick to the collage and what I had, but so throughout the process, I'm removing, kind of cutting things down, kind of sewing areas and then taking it off. So there's a lot of play that's happening, both before, during, and then after. Sometimes the Velcro pieces the panel pieces will cover the whole Velcro. Sometimes I will shift it and move it around if there's a lot wider amount of space. I think but sometimes I love myself. Sometimes I love me more.
Mm-hmm.
That painting, there was a lot more Velcro negative space. So a lot of those pieces kind of float throughout those spaces until I find it right. And then the hardest part is having an image that you've taken and handed to a gallery such as you guys, and making sure that the pieces fit that same image.
I see.
So like it won't change from show to show. I think after it shows the first time, it's in place.
Oh, interesting. Why?
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you had shown it somewhere else and say, "Hey, Ali, these pieces are variable," that's part of the conceptual conceit or thrust of this this work, I would have been fine with it.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't found a reason to do such.
Right.
Right. I mean, I think just like anything, like even if there was no Velcro and it was just a painting, like you and I as painters, we know when that painting is done.
Right.
And I think the movement around the painting is also the same thing. I'm not trying to be like Vincent Desiderio and like rework a painting 4 years over that, but I do feel like at some point there's a part of me that says it says what it says, it feels right, and there's no need for me to play with it. That doesn't mean that I won't go back to it maybe 5-10 years from now and say, I wonder if I move this piece or add another piece.
Right.
But I do think that's, I'm still a painter at heart. I think that I know when my paintings are done. Even when there's more options available where I say, I could add more color here or give it a little bit more a pasta look over here, those kind of things. But I think you kind of stop playing with it after a certain point. So there's play, but after once it's shown, I think I kind of I'm already moving on to the next thing. But we were talking about interactiveness and temptation and all that for the viewer. I think it's interesting because I'm working on these. I have a lot of things going on, like in the studio, like big stuff, whatever. I have a few other paintings that are in progress. But like in my house, like I have like a small spot that I've been working with 3D prints, and so I'm making these like robotic toys, nostalgic and reminiscence of like my childhood, right?
Right.
Or even like the models. I've been working on models. You know how like toy models, like you would have to break it off of the plastic grid. Yeah, so I'm making like
off those weird little pylons, or like
yeah. You break them and then you snap them together.
Right.
Together. So I'm doing that. Like I've been using like CAD or Tinkercad and all these other different things. I'm also using virtual reality where I can actually like sculpt a piece and then I can 3D print it. So I'm making all these toys. And I wanted to do something. This was all that like time where I was saying like there's moments where I have a big chunk of time and I'm in the studio. Right. So I'm like playing with these like kind of things, putting motors in them and stuff like that. And then I realized how I still wanted it to connect with the painting. And so again, going back to like the viewer, I'm putting these toys inside these boxes, and I have a shrink wrap, so I'm like shrink wrapping. So the toys are going in here. I'm shrink wrapping it, and then I'm painting on this. Like as a geek, I'm such a big geek. Like there's that moment where you have like a toy or something like that. Like, do I open it or do I hold on to it for the value?
Like in mint condition, right? Like
yeah. So the option for the viewer would be is what not knowing inside the toy that you can't touch worth like destroying the painting. And so I'm really interested in that because it's on saran wrap. So once you remove it, the painting's done. So I'm really interested in that kind of more participation from the viewer and not having access, me personally not having access to that experience, and thinking about like the temptation for the viewer to, and I think that goes more into like how I feel as a black man, that kind of feeling of like what, like there's plays like what people see on the outside and what's really in the inside, right?
Right.
Sometimes I feel like when people can box you in, they're so protective of wanting you to be the person you are on the outside,
right?
That actually getting to know you, right, and see your faults. And so I think that's the same thing with this. The outside, right? You're gonna actually be able to acknowledge and expect and see it, but you have to let go of what you think it is to open it up to get inside, to use the thing. So that's why I'm really playing with like more of like psychological kind of thing. And also thinking about like this accessibility, like to make paintings and sell paintings, you got to be a rich person. And I think talking about things like disenfranchised people of color, and not be able to have them have access to these paintings because they're priced so high, that bothers me. So like I'm thinking about these pieces being like whatever I'm making. I think I'm gonna make about 10 of them,
right?
And then I'm going to make it kind of like what Radiohead did with their one album. Like you pay what you can. Pay what you can.
Yeah.
And there'll only be 10, and once they're gone, they're gone. I want all 10 to connect. So at some point, like just like trading cards, like you don't get every single trading card.
Right.
You have to kind of either look for it or just kind of imagine what it is. So I want there to only be 10, and each toy and painting to connect with each other.
Will the box be white? Like, so if you destroy the painting, you get the toy but a white box?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Oh, so then it depends on what the payoff you view the payoff as the toy. And you won't be able to see the toy unless you destroy the painting.
Yeah, you won't be able to see it. You won't even know which one you have, honestly. And I honestly been going back and forth about like how I'm going to talk about this and share it with people, but I don't even think I'm going to let people know what's inside of it. I think that the ability to kind of question what's inside. There'll be small hints, but I do want there to be some mystery, enough mystery to make you kind of question, do you think you should like open it,
Right.
to see what's in there. So I'm excited about that, man. Like that's been 3 or 4 months in the work right now. I think I was trying to have it done by my birthday in May, but with the coronavirus and all other stuff, I think I just gonna push it. But that I think has more participation for the viewer than I've ever given in a while. So I'm really excited about that.
That's interesting. This also introduces this idea of risk.
Yeah.
But it's a risk only. The size of the risk is dependent on your perceived value, difference in value of the two objects, the painting and the toy.
Yeah.
Because if you view them exactly as the same, that's wild. That's an interesting conundrum. Speaking of interactivity, I was also wanting to talk about a little bit. Are you still doing animations?
Yeah. So a painting, actually hit it under there, but a painting that is kind of like in progress. There's a segment inside the painting that has a video screen in it.
Yeah.
And it's a. Actually, give me 1 second. Let me see if I can find the collage of it. It's. Here it is. So this is the collage.
Okay.
This grid is part of it.
I see.
The fish that's down here.
You're right.
That is going to be animated. So the screen will be behind the painting, inside the painting, and that fish will be moving. So that's as far as animation is going. That's just the most I'm doing, and I think it's going to be really rough. I think it's going to be like 12 frames, and it will be on a loop. Just constantly swimming around in circles. But I haven't done any major thing. I thought about something a while back, but animation takes so much time.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm so spread thin with so many other things.
Yeah, you got to sit at like a workstation for like hours on end to get even just a little bit of animation done. It's a time crusher.
And you can't BS animation. Like you can tell when someone doesn't know what they're doing, and then you can tell when someone does.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you try to cut corners, it becomes very evident how bad it is.
Oh yeah.
So I feel like if I go into the project of doing the animation, I want to make sure I can complete it and not try to cut corners. And that's tough.
Yeah, like when your Saturday morning cartoon, like when they had enough money to actually go to a good animation studio, like why does this episode look so much better than the rest of the damn episodes?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially like anime, like most, if you pause anime, like they have the most ugliest faces, and I love them to death.
Yeah.
I'm like using those in like some of like my paintings because they're like the most roughest, ugliest thing.
Right.
But then you like unpause and pause it again within that like 12 frame thing. It was a better face. It's like,
right.
in the in betweens that they're doing, they're just like really rough and ugly and stuff like that. But the it's so quick. It's like a quick movement in anime that you'll never notice it.
The frames per second.
But for me, I'm not a studio, so you're gonna notice it. You're gonna be like, man, that's the ugliest animation ever. And I'm not gonna be able to BS it. I'm just gonna be like, yeah, you're right. And you can't put that in things that you put so much time into. So
that's true.
Yeah, I think when I get some more time, or when projects are kind of getting out there, then I can probably do something like that. But I don't know, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild that we were talking a little bit about how you view paintings and like who has access to paintings and things like that. Do you think it's gonna? I've been under the impression that these differences between who has access to quote unquote culture or whatever like that is only going to become like all the other health outcomes and stuff like that is only going to become more exacerbated. Like access to
Yeah.
culture, like we're not going to all be able to crowd museums on Free Thursday anymore. Um, Everything is either going to be privately owned or by appointment, at least for a good chunk of time.
Yeah. I think that's a problem for me. I see, or I've always seen art as accessible up until when I got out of grad school, and I think the housing market crash made it very clear the differences. I think people that have money to buy art,
Right.
people that you hoped would be able to buy art couldn't buy art, and so I think it's the same thing with the coronavirus happening now. We'll notice that, but I do think it's important for me to find a way to open up ways to kind of have what I'm talking about accessible in the sense of what a painting can be. Because it's not like I'm doing photography and I can print multiples of it, and due to the many I can make, I can
Right.
lower the price. Um, but, I've been playing around with another idea too, is that like, for 6 months of the year, no matter what painting I create, whether it's big or small or like that, I want to price it so low that anyone can afford it. So I've been playing with that idea, but man, I think I've lost my thought with that. I think we were still talking about accessibility, but I think that's really kind of all I want to say about it. I do feel like that is something I think about
Right.
as a painter, how that's kind of an impossible journey to do, is figure out accessibility for something that, like you said, would be in a museum. And I think people think the museum is accessible, but it's really not. It's kind of yeah, it's not.
No, it's definitely not. Yeah, well, we could spend a couple other hours on that.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, I also interested, like, you know, I think a lot of people. Excuse me. Oh, I don't know. I think a lot of people are going to be curious about or interested in readjusting perhaps their prices. Maybe not the more quote unquote established blue chip artists, but people like just starting out or mid career. Like also that whole dynamic I think is going to change. Like you said, after the housing crisis, the wealth kind of moved upward. So the people that really were buying a lot of art already own a ton of it,
yeah,
and they already are buying the really expensive stuff. So question of who is the art for and what does it do becomes kind of pushed to the forefront.
Well, I think there's also a good time for artists to consider how they want the market to look. I think this is
Right.
definitely a rough time for artists, especially if this is like your income. Like this is your life, your livelihood. But I've always believed this. Even when kind of like started the book club collective, it was the thing I brought up to all the members. I was like, why is the art world like this? It doesn't have to be. We all don't like the kind of like things that are happening in the art world.
Right.
Um, it definitely needs to be changed, specifically after the housing market crash. Because now we have all this debt from grad school or undergrad that we have to pay off that we can't because
Right.
we're not having our work out like that. Um, but I do think like this is a time for artists to begin to ask, like who's running things, and is it them?
Right.
And I think we all know it's not. It's not us. It's a lot of going on out there. But then, as far as pricing goes, I think about music. I think about like Chance the Rapper, who's
Right.
still not under a label. He kind of control like his market, and
Right.
you've done a lot of different things where you try to figure out how to like work your market and things like
Right.
that. Um, but I would love to see artists be creative in that element. When it comes to like artwork, we're super creative. When it
Right.
comes to like business, we're like not creative at all. And we
I'll
kind
throw
of
it on
like,
Instagram.
yeah, but we kind of give that away to the collectors. We give that away to the galleries and museums, all those people, and those roles are important. They are important, but we do give away a lot. So I would love to see as we have the months and hopefully not years of this issue, this pandemic, that we begin to put our heads together. We come together as we always have and find ways that we can make art accessible, make work interesting. And so then going back to the conversation about um, having access to work won't be as difficult anymore because it would be, maybe this painting goes to someone's grandma, and it's not like overly priced to $100,000 by the time it's to the fourth collector. So I feel like again we can ramble on about that, but I would love to see some creativity in that element. It would only make your work, my work, all of our work kind of better.
Yeah.
People that didn't used to have a platform will have that platform and be able to kind of like people will be buying their work and you will see their work maybe a lot easily. I don't know. It's a theory. It's a thought, but
yeah, no, I think it's a good thought. It's also interesting that I don't know if you heard about this. Paddle 8 went under the auction site.
Wait, say it again.
I think Paddle 8 went under the online auction site.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they had a big hubbub, but that I think a bunch of the artists that sold there, Paddle 8 couldn't pay them because they just got wiped out. And then a bunch of other people came in and paid out the artists. But yeah, I think Paddle 8's gone. So yeah, I think a lot of creativity, necessity being the mother of creation, or is going to definitely be in a full effect. Anything you want to plug before we wrap it up?
No, man. I think we talked about a lot of good stuff. I might ramble on a little bit too long, but
I definitely want to see images of new stuff. Maybe give me a sneak peek of the 3D printing, and we can use those. That can be the teaser for what's underneath the painting.
Yeah, I definitely will.
Yeah. I'll tie this recording off. Here, I'll actually end the recording part now.